Emily, just 8 years old, saw her life turned upside down when she lost her mother in a tragic accident. Now, living under the care of her father, Oliver, she found herself immersed in a house that seemed to have lost its essence. The warmth and joy that once filled her days had dissipated, and she was alone, not fully understanding what had happened. However, when a secret about Oliver's behavior came to light, his life would change irreversibly. Before everything changed, Emily's mornings were filled with a routine of love and laughter. The sweet smell of warm bread always wafted through the house, while her mother, Claire, started her day with a beaming smile. "Good morning, my little one," Claire said in a soft voice, handing a slice of warm bread to Emily. Emily, still with sleepy eyes, hugged her mother and responded with a shy smile. "Good morning, Mom. What are we going to invent today?" Claire laughed fondly, and while spreading butter on the toast, replied, "Let's do something big today, aren't we? What do you think about us drawing a giant mural?" "That! Let's go!" Emily exclaimed, excited by the idea. The house, then, was a place full of laughter and stories. During breakfast, the two talked about everything and more: the antics of Emily's friends at school, the plants in the garden that Emily thought talked to each other, and even the clouds in the sky, which Claire always said had magical forms. The afternoons were also full of little adventures. When they walked through the city streets, they invented stories about the people who crossed their path. "Look at that man with the suitcase, Emily. I bet he's an adventurer on a secret mission," Claire said with a twinkle in her eye. Emily had fun with her mother's ideas, creating her own stories to add. "Or maybe he's a mad scientist who studies stars." It was their world, simple but full of enchantment and imagination. At night, Claire used to read to Emily before bed. Her mother's soft voice was like a hug, and the stories she told always ended with a kiss on Emily's forehead. "Good night, my star. I love you more than anything in the universe," Claire said with a peaceful smile before turning off the light. Emily's life seemed perfect, but everything changed on a morning that seemed like any other. She was sitting on the living room rug, drawing with her colored pencils, when she heard the front door open. Her father, Oliver, came in, and something in his eyes made Emily stop. He looked different, like he was carrying a very heavy weight. "Emily, I need to tell you something important," he said, his voice hoarse and hesitant. Emily, feeling butterflies in her stomach, looked at him, hoping it was just a passing thing. "Your mother, she had an accident, and she's not coming home." Emily stood frozen, not completely understanding what was happening. She looked at her father, waiting for him to say that it was a lie, that she could run to Claire's room and everything would go back to normal. But Oliver just stood there, with his head down, as if he were carrying an impossible weight. Emily's world fell apart in that instant. She didn't cry right away. Instead, he went up to his room, hugged his pillow, and stared at the wall. The silence that took over the house was deafening. When the tears finally came, they were silent, so Oliver wouldn't hear them. In the days that followed, the house became unrecognizable. The radio, which Claire always turned on in the morning, remained off. The kitchen, once full of laughter and aromas, was now cold and empty. Claire's room was locked, and Emily felt a strange fear of even approaching the door. The house, which was once a welcoming home, now seemed like a lifeless place. Eleanor, Emily's grandmother, could no longer hold back the frustration that consumed her. His chest was tight with the anguish he felt for his granddaughter, who was increasingly isolated, sadder, like a flower that withered without sun. He stared at Oliver, trying to find something, any sign of understanding or regret, but all he saw was a closed man, with his eyes lost in the turned-off television screen, as if it were possible to escape the pain simply by looking at any point. The environment was charged, too heavy for her. "I couldn't wait any longer." With a short breath and a tense voice, she stood up from the chair where she was sitting. The tension in his body was reflected in his voice, which, despite being firm, carried the concern and urgency of someone who didn't know what else to do. "Oliver, we need to talk about Emily," she said, with a tone that brooked no denial. He didn't look away from the screen. His shoulders were rigid, and his posture showed that, although he didn't move, he was absorbed in his own thoughts, as if he was trying to ignore the situation around him. A long sigh escaped his lips, and then he responded, his voice emotionless, empty. "What's wrong with her? She's fine. Go to school, eat, do what needs to be done. I don't know what you want me to do." Oliver's words sounded so distant and mechanical that Eleanor's anger exploded inside her like an unexpected storm. It was impossible for him not to see, not be able to perceive the pain that Emily carried with her. With her heart pounding, she took a step forward, unable to control the need to speak, to make Oliver understand what was happening. "It's not okay, Oliver. It's not okay. Don't you see? She's sad, she's lost, and you're so caught up in your own pain that you can't realize what's happening to your daughter." Oliver finally looked at her. His eyes, which had been empty and distant, were now closed in an expression of disdain, and a dry, bitter laugh escaped his mouth. The anger, which had been contained within his body, now overflowed into cutting words. "Suffering? She's just a child. She will overcome it. Everyone overcomes it, right? That's how things work." Those words cut Eleanor like a sharp blade. The pain she felt was not just from Oliver's coldness, but from the insensitivity with which he treated Emily's suffering. Eleanor felt a lump form in her throat. How could he be so blind? How could he think that getting over was simply forgetting? She couldn't take it anymore to see Emily being left aside like this. "How will she get over it, Oliver? She lost her mother." Eleanor's voice was full of indignation and despair. His chest tightened with each word. "And you're so wrapped up in your own pain that you don't even realize what you're doing with it." The tension in the room increased. The silence between them was thick, as if the air had grown thicker. Oliver stood up suddenly, and his face turned red, a mixture of anger and frustration. His voice, which until then had been cold, now rose, exploding into a scream. "I'm doing the best I can, Eleanor. It's not easy for me either. I lost it too." Eleanor felt a mixture of compassion and frustration mixing inside her. She knew Oliver was suffering too, but what he couldn't understand was that his suffering didn't justify Emily's emotional abandonment. He didn't see that she needed him too, not just as a father, but as someone who could see the pain she was carrying. Emily didn't just need a man in the house. She needed someone who loved and understood her, and he was too busy with his own pain to notice. "The best is not enough, Oliver. You are losing your daughter, and you don't see it. Emily needs you now, not tomorrow, not later. She needs a father who sees her, who loves her, who realizes that she is sinking, not from a man who hides behind his own suffering, believing that everything will pass with time." "I don't have time for this, Eleanor. He hesitated, but then resumed. "I'm the only one here for her. She needs discipline, not whining. She is fine. She will get over this." Oliver's words were like a punch to Eleanor's stomach. How could he be so insensitive? Eleanor, who had always been the one who took care of everyone, was now being ignored by him. He couldn't see what was in front of his eyes. Emily's deep sadness. "Don't you see, Oliver?" Eleanor exclaimed, pushing herself to her feet, frustration boiling over. "Can't you see that your daughter is sinking into pain, into loneliness? And you're so obsessed with drowning in your own pain that you don't notice that you're sinking even deeper." Emily, eyes wide, backed away from the door. Her grandmother's words reverberated in her mind. She sat up in bed, trying to process everything she had just heard. What was happening? Why was everything so confusing? Eleanor, realizing that the situation was far from resolved, sat down next to Emily, trying to give her some comfort. She knew Oliver's words were cruel, but she also knew he couldn't let her go through this alone. "Emily, honey, I know this is all difficult, but you are not alone." "Ndi," she said, running her hand through her granddaughter's hair. "I'll be here. I will always be here for you, and we will get through this together." Emily, speechless, looked at her grandmother and hugged her tightly. She felt the comfort of that presence, but at the same time, the emptiness was still there. His mother's absence was a hole that seemed to have no end. Meanwhile, in the living room, Oliver fell silent, Eleanor's words still echoing in his mind. He didn't know how to react. The truth was that he was lost, but he couldn't admit it. He sat down, his head in his hands, as if he was trying to understand what was happening to himself. It was a night like any other in the house. Emily was in her room, trying to focus on a book her grandmother, Eleanor, had brought her. The sound on the television in the living room was low, but suddenly the noise stopped. Emily frowned, feeling something strange in the air. She stood up slowly, her heart beating faster, and approached the door. She hesitated before opening it a little, trying to hear better. His father Oliver's voice sounded on the other end, low and urgent. "I told you it will work. I just need this test to end soon. Eleanor won't have anything. I'm the father, so it's obvious that custody will be mine." He paused, and Emily froze, listening to every word, trying to process what he was saying. "Yes, I know the money is blocked. But as soon as everything is resolved, it will be released. I'm going to pay off my debts and start from scratch. I'm not going to let a nosy old woman ruin my plans." Emily felt a shiver run through her body. Money? What did he mean by that? She knew her mother had left her something, but she had never known exactly what. Now, everything was starting to make sense in a scary but cruel way. She continued listening, unable to move, her body chilled by the revelation. "No, I won't let her take Emily. It has nothing to do with the child. As soon as I get the money, I'll get someone to take care of her. I don't need that." Those words fell on Emily like a bomb. Her father didn't see her as a daughter. She was just a liability, something he would have to maintain until his financial situation was resolved. A burden, nothing more. She backed away from the door, her heart racing and her breath catching. Tears began to fill her eyes, but she held them back tightly. She didn't want him to know that he had heard her. She didn't want to show him how much those words destroyed her. He didn't care about her. He just wanted the money. When the phone hung up, Emily sat up in bed, chest tight, her father's words echoing in her mind. How could he be like this? How could he treat his daughter this way? It was then that the bedroom door opened softly. Eleanor entered, her eyes quickly settling on Emily. She approached the bed and sat down next to it, with a look full of affection and concern. "Is everything okay, dear? I thought you were already asleep." Eleanor's voice was soft, but the concern was clear. Emily quickly tried to wipe away her tears, but her grandmother saw her and moved even closer. "It's okay," Emily replied, trying to force a smile, but her voice was shaking. Eleanor saw through the lie immediately. "It doesn't look good." "What happened?" she asked, with the kindness that only a grandmother could have. Emily felt the pain overflowing. She wanted to tell everything, but she was afraid that no one would believe her. What if his father became even more cruel? Eleanor, however, looked at her with an understanding that Emily had never seen in her father's eyes. It was as if she knew, without having to say a word. "I heard Dad on the phone," Emily began, her voice breaking. "He said he just wanted the money his mother left. He doesn't care about me, Grandma. He wants the money, not me." Eleanor felt the weight of her granddaughter's words like a punch in the stomach, but at the same time, a growing strength took hold of her. She hugged Emily more intensely, trying to offer some comfort, knowing that now things would no longer be the same. "I know, darling, I know," Eleanor said softly, holding her granddaughter close to her. "But you are not alone. I will take care of you, always. He won't do what he wants. He said he would hire someone to take care of me after he got the money." Emily was shaking, but the words came out of her mouth with the force of a truth she could no longer hide. Eleanor remained silent for a moment, processing what her granddaughter had just revealed. Her face hardened slightly, but she pulled Emily into a warm, protective hug. "I believe you, Emily, and that gives me even more reason to fight for you. Don't worry, I won't let him hurt you," Eleanor said, her voice soft but full of firmness. Emily felt a deep sense of relief. Something she didn't know was missing from her life. For the first time, she confided her fears to someone, and it gave her the strength to carry on. On the day of the hearing, Emily was nervous. Sitting next to Eleanor, she tried to concentrate, but the tension in the air was palpable. Oliver was on the other side of the room, his posture tense but his expression calm, as if he was trying to hide something. Emily tried not to look at him, focusing only on her grandmother's hand that was squeezing hers, offering a little comfort. When it was her turn to speak, Emily's heart beat faster. She looked at the judge, then at Eleanor, and finally at Oliver. He was watching her with a strange, almost disdainful look, as if he was trying to intimidate her. She took a deep breath, feeling courage building within her, and then said, in a firm but shaky voice, I want to live with my grandmother. My father doesn't care about me. He just wants the money my mother left." The room fell silent. Oliver shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable with Emily's words, but she was unfazed. The judge asked her to continue, and Emily, in a stronger voice, explained everything she had heard that night, each word still fresh in her memory. When she finished speaking, the room was stunned. Oliver tried to interrupt her, claiming she was lying, but the judge reprimanded him and asked him to stay quiet. Emily, with steady eyes and a trembling voice, finished, "Mom always said love is the most important thing, and that's how I feel about my grandmother. I want to be with her." The truth was told, and now the court would have to decide. A few hours later, the verdict came. The judge stood up, and everyone in the room quieted down, waiting for the announcement. "Mr. Oliver, the evidence presented today is serious, as is your daughter's testimony. This court concludes that his priority is not Emily's well-being, but rather the money left by his late wife, Claire. Therefore, custody of Emily will be transferred to Madame Eleanor. Additionally, Mr. Oliver, you will be placed in protective custody while an investigation is conducted into your actions regarding Madame Claire's life insurance." Emily could hardly believe her ears. His eyes met Eleanor's, who had tears in her eyes, but also a smile of relief. As Oliver was escorted by 2 agents, he took one last look at Emily, but she didn't look away. She knew that finally she was safe. Now, with Emily and Eleanor's lives reorganizing, the peace that once seemed distant was beginning to take hold. The park was a place her mother loved, and when Emily looked around, she felt a connection with her. A sense that somehow her mother's presence was still there, in the air, in the trees, in the children's laughter. "I loved coming here with your mother," said Eleanor, looking wistfully at the surrounding scenery. "She loved the swings. When I was little, I spent hours here, always asking to go higher." Emily smiled, imagining her mother back then. She had never known it, but now it seemed that somehow her story was unfolding in the same landscape. The grandmother noticed the sparkle in Emily's eyes and, without saying anything else, guided her to one of the swings. "Let's see if you can still beat her records," Eleanor said with a smile, gently pushing the swing toward Emily. Emily began to sway, feeling the wind on her face, the freedom of not having to worry about what was happening inside the house. It was a new sensation for her, something she hadn't experienced in a long time. Eleanor's smile was there, firm and welcoming, and Emily felt enormous gratitude for having that figure by her side. The day passed quickly, and as they walked home, Eleanor asked, "What do you think about starting to keep a journal? I know that sometimes it can be difficult to talk about everything you've been through, but writing can help." Emily thought for a moment, her gaze distant, as if she was reflecting on the suggestion. "I never thought about it, but maybe I should try." Eleanor smiled and patted Emily's hand. "Doing this will help you remember the good and overcome the not-so-good. Your mother did that, you know." Emily looked at her grandmother in surprise. "She wrote?" "Yes," replied Eleanor. "She wrote whenever she had something important to tell or something that made her smile. Sometimes a simple thought could change her day." Emily smiled, once again feeling like her mother was still there, guiding her even without being physically present. That night, when she got home, she picked up a pen and notebook that Eleanor gave her. He began to write, the words flowing like a relief to his heavy heart. The following week, Emily had already started attending her new school. Despite her initial fears about moving, she had already made some friends. She told her grandmother a joke a friend made during recess, which made her laugh out loud. For the first time in a long time, Eleanor saw a sparkle in Emily's eyes that she thought was lost. They walked together to the park. It was a beautiful place, with tall trees and old swings. The smell of fresh grass mixed with the laughter of children running around. Emily stopped, looking around. Something about that park felt familiar, although she didn't know why. "This is where your mother brought you when you were little," Eleanor explained, taking Emily's hand. "She loved this place. She said it was perfect for dreaming." Emily smiled as she looked at the swing. "I remember," she whispered. They approached the swings, and Emily settled down there. Eleanor started pushing her gently, like Claire used to do in the past. Emily's laughter echoed in the air, and Eleanor felt warmth fill her heart. It was as if, in a way, Claire was there, watching them. After a while, they sat down on the grass. Emily looked up at the sky, where large white clouds were slowly floating. "I miss Mom every day," she said, her voice soft. Eleanor put an arm around Emily's shoulders. "I miss her too, darling, but you know what? She is always with us, in every memory, in every laugh. It never really goes away." Emily rested her head on her grandmother's shoulder, feeling safe. "I think she would be happy to see us here." "I'm sure," replied Eleanor with a smile. As the weeks went by, Emily adapted to her new routine. Eleanor made a point of being present in every aspect of her life. She helped her with her homework, prepared her meals, and every night she read her a story before bed. But what Emily liked most were the simple moments, like afternoons at the park or evenings baking cookies in the kitchen. "These cookies are magical, Grandma," said Emily, licking her dough-filled fingers. "I think you have superpowers." Eleanor laughed as she placed a plate in the oven. "The secret is to do everything with love. It is more powerful than any magic." At school, Emily also progressed. She made friends with her classmates and even felt comfortable talking about her mother. During a drawing project, she drew a large tree with 3 people underneath: herself, Eleanor, and Claire. "It's my family," she explained to the teacher. "My mom is in heaven, but she's still a part of everything." The teacher congratulated her on her work, and Emily felt something new: pride. One day, when they were returning from the park, Eleanor decided to broach the subject of Oliver. "It's not your fault what he did, Emily. None of this is because of you. He made bad choices, but it's not your fault." Emily remained thoughtful. "I know, Grandma. Before I thought he didn't love me because I did something wrong, but now I think he was the one who didn't know what love was." Eleanor stopped and knelt down to Emily's level. "You are an extraordinary girl, you know that. Your mother knew this, and so did I. Don't let anything or anyone make you doubt that." Emily smiled and hugged her. "I love you, Grandma. I love you too, my little one. To infinity." The future remained uncertain, but at that moment, neither of them thought about it. They were together, and that was enough. This journey showed that even in the most difficult situations, love and courage have the power to bring transformation. Emily, who faced so much loss and challenges, found a new kind of strength in her grandmother's unconditional support. Gradually, she realized that, after the pain, a new beginning was not only possible, but essential. The bond between them, strengthened by overcoming adversity, was now the basis of a new life where hope flourished. Emily's courage, fueled by Eleanor's love, brought her the peace she never imagined she could achieve. Together, they gave themselves a chance to start over, and with that, the future became a promise of possibilities. If you like this story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Here, you will find exciting stories every day, made to touch your heart. And I'm sure that the story that's appearing on the screen now will move you too. Don't miss it.